at high noon on ABC. They play it at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. It's the Big 12 Championship, and it is the first rematch we're going to discuss here today. The aforementioned BYU Cougars, 11-1, squaring off against Texas Tech, also 11-1. Texas Tech favored by about 12.5 points. As I said, this is a rematch. Texas Tech won the first meeting by a 29-7 score. My question, just to kick things off here, a bunch of distraction this week with Kalani Sitake.
Yes, has been.
All right, bunch of distractions. Went thermonuclear on Monday night. Everybody found out about it then.
Uh-huh.
How much does it not fire you up if you are in that locker room to hear that the coach that you know and love decided to forego an $11.5 million offer, something in that neighborhood from...
Is that what it was?
Something from a school across the good old US of A. And he wants to stay right there with you in Provo. It's going to be in Arlington to square off against a team that beat you earlier in the year. Does that fire you up? Are you still distracted? How do you feel about that?
That's not going to appear. That quote is not going to appear in like the Central PA Board of Tourism.
No.
Somebody just turned out $11 million to move here. I don't know how it makes me feel. I don't know. I think the players prepare. I think the players are obviously amped to sort of get revenge on Texas Tech and win the Big 12. It's a huge deal for BYU. It's a huge deal for Texas Tech. These are two teams looking to win this conference the way that it's constituted for the first time. And I think this game is a huge deal, right? It's a cherry on top of an unbelievable season for really both of these teams, but specifically Texas Tech with where they've been recently and being pretty good but not quite breaking through. And it would be huge for BYU. I think BYU has a very specific advantage in that Texas Tech has prepared for BYU, and BYU has seen how Texas Tech can specifically scheme and succeed against you.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, vice versa, right? That Texas Tech saw how BYU prepared, and they were able to succeed in a way BYU clearly wasn't. But that's why it's said, it's tough to beat a good team twice. And so it seems like a big line. And it's reasonable given the, 29-7 the first time around?
Yeah.
I think there is something to BYU having the ability to self-scout. I think there is something to the fact that Bear Bachmeier is as young as he is. What does he weigh, 160 pounds, 155?
I mean, he's it depends on the week, really.
Right.
I mean, we've had him as high as 270, as low as 150. So somewhere in between, I would say.
We just had Thanksgiving, so let's assume 253.
253, okay.
Okay. There is something to his growth being more dramatic because of his age than Baron Morton's. Baron Morton is sort of who he is, which is good. And I think there's always just going to be growth, especially when you have that kind of loss. You're like, oh, this is what they were doing. This is how, okay, I see now.
Right.
So I just am not fully coming around to the fact that BYU can address being completely hounded up front by this Texas Tech front. You just can't get better in a season. You can get healthier. You can keep more guys in to protect, but like that wave of violence that Texas Tech has up front on defense, I just don't know how you account for that in a few weeks. So I'm taking Texas Tech here. What they've done to control games from the onset more often is more impressive to me. They've gotten healthier. Everybody gets healthier. I'm in on Texas Tech here to do more of what they've been doing. There's no reason for me to think that they're going to fall off and that BYU has 30 more points of control over these past few weeks. So
okay,
I'm gonna say Texas Tech wins this one. I have it at like 31-17. So I guess barely covering, but I just haven't found where the consistent explosion is coming from on offense from BYU to justify them being that much better against a team like this.
I sunk my teeth into that first game. I wanted to go back and watch it.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't particularly close on the scoreboard. Texas Tech led 26-0 until the final 3 minutes, right? I do think, though, if you pop the hood on that first game, it was actually a lot closer than the score indicates. And I realize that may sound batty to people out there who look at the score and like, what are you talking about? I say that because this was very much a defensive battle the first time around. There were a total of 32 third down attempts in this game. Both defenses were forcing a lot of those high leverage moments, havoc plays, things of that nature. BYU forced 5 Texas Tech field goal attempts. It's not like they were overpowered by the Texas Tech offense at all. The difference was that Texas Tech on defense was just a little bit better. They held BYU to 3 of 14 on third downs. They forced 3 turnovers, which was not the norm for BYU by any stretch. But BYU fell in a hole, and they weren't able to get it going on the ground with LJ Martin or Bear Bachmeier, which meant Bear Bachmeier had to throw it 38 times, which, by the way, was the most passing attempts he's had in any game this season. So we could debate the merits of what the game plan was going in versus coming out, but I feel fairly confident in saying that they had to deviate a little bit from what they originally planned.
Right.
Tech was the better team in that game. Even if you take out all the turnovers, Tech was the better team, and I think the better team won that game. But my sense is going into this one that we're going to see a very similar game this time around. And provided BYU doesn't have some of those mistakes, to your point about self-scouting, I think it's closer. And I don't think that's a stretch because, again, this is not a team that's been that mistake-prone this season. I think they're like plus 12. They've had turnover luck, but they're like plus 12 or something in turnover margin.
Yeah.
I think the first game was a bit of an aberration. How much, that remains to be seen, and we could talk about that when we do the recap.
Yeah.
I think I'm with you. I think Tech wins this one as well. I think they are good enough to stop the run. They're good enough to force the pass. And that's a matchup to me where they have a significant advantage.
Yep.
Per our friend Max Olson over at ESPN, Tech has the best stop rate of any defense in the country, which means they're basically just not allowing teams to score. So I'm of the mind that we're again going to see something of a defensive slugfest in this one. I don't have it quite as high scoring as you do. I've got 23-16 Texas Tech winning, moving on as Big 12 champion. But if we're going to think of it in terms of the point spread, I would have BYU to cover.
Okay. And by the way, to your point of forcing all of those field goals, if there is a vulnerability, if the what is it in the Death Star? Not that Texas Tech has reached that status yet.
Right.
There's something with parsecs. Ty, this isn't my universe.
What are we talking about here? Yeah. It's the flaw in the Death Star is what you're talking about.
Yeah, the flaw. Yeah. But so Texas Tech in the red zone specifically has been not great offensively, right? In terms of finishing drives, especially against the better teams on their schedule. It hasn't prevented wins by and large, but right now their red zone touchdown rate is 58%. Their goal to go touchdown rate is 75%. It's below average. And so it doesn't matter if you score on explosion plays, and Texas Tech does plenty of that. But that is, I think, a tip of the cap to you for noticing that from that first matchup, that closing those drives, finishing those drives, I think is a big deal in this game. And quite excited to see it. I worry that it's going to be trying to build the plane entirely out of Bear Bachmeier if the run isn't there once again.